Somebody noted that at San Diego, that's happening right now, Comic Con International, Evil Inc. INK is exhibiting out there, and that's a comics publishing imprint by Coheed and Cambria, a hard rock group, very, very big rock stars in certain circles. And somebody gave me a heads up through the Comic Lab Discord that I should, be, cautious of my trademark and stuff. They've been around for years. I've been around for years. It's not an issue. But it brought to mind a wonderful story. I think I was in, oh golly, was it one of the Canadian conventions? I forget, maybe Baltimore. Baltimore feels right. I was exhibiting way back when, and I was exhibiting, and Coheed and Cambria were exhibiting at the same show. I'm Evil Inc. INC, they're Evil Inc. INK, and they're rock stars, and I'm not. And all weekend long, there were very, very excited people rushing up to my booth, ready to meet a rock star, and being faced with me instead. It really does a number on your ego to see so many smiles just disappear off people's faces. If I wasn't such an egomaniac, it would have driven me to drink. But yeah, I've been familiar with these guys for a long time. They do neat stuff. They do a lot of neat stuff. Comic Con International is happening right now, and there's of course all the announcements and the goings on there. I'm going to be really interested to hear my Comic Lab podcast partner Dave Kellett bring home his report. As you remember, 2 years ago, uh, they had basically everything had kind of been shut down because of the writer's strike. And people like Dave saw a massive uptick in sales. And the year after, the big question is, were those sales going to carry over into the next year? Because what people are finding very much in comic conventions in general, particularly at Comic Con International, is that people are there for the cosplay, the movie announcements, for the opportunities to meet celebrities and stuff like that. Not so much for finding a new comic to read or buying books and stuff like that. It was interesting. Last year, Dave reported that those healthy sales had actually pushed forward into the next year. And this year, I'm really interested to see where things are going to go. And so Dave usually brings back a con report to the Comic Lab podcast, and something that we're both very proud of on that show. We share actual numbers. Like it's not they we it's you won't hear all the crap that you hear on the show floor, like, oh, we sold out all of our books. That's great, you sold out all of your books. How many did you bring? If the answer is five, I'm not so impressed. If the answer is 5 boxes, now we can talk. This is something we're very proud of. We talk numbers on the Comic Lab podcast. So he'll be bringing back a full convention report, and there is a lot. There's a lot there to be dissected and unpacked. Again, if you're a longtime watcher of the live stream, you know that I am not bullish on attending comic conventions. In fact, I think we talked about that last week to a certain extent. But it's very interesting for somebody like Dave, who can show a legitimate profit at a show like this year after year, and find out what's working for him, what's not working, what he's going to keep doing, what he's going to discontinue doing. I talked to him for a very short time after preview night, and he made one small change to his comic convention booth that resulted in close to $1,000 of extra sales on the first night. It was very, very interesting just to see something like one little thing paid big dividends in his booth designs. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that coming up on the Comic Lab podcast. So we've got a question here in the chat. Any opinions of the value of email list subscribers versus Patreon members when you're running a Kickstarter? Uh, Listen, they're both good. So when you're running a Kickstarter, you have a couple of things that you know that you can lean on. The first thing is Kickstarter itself. Kickstarter is going to bring a certain amount of discoverability. It's a platform that has really, really perfected discoverability and delivers on it time after time after time in dollars and cents. So you've got that. It's not going to be enough to push you through. In other words, if you don't bring your own audience to that Kickstarter, Kickstarter's probably not going to be able to push you all the way over the goal, assuming your goal is like an actual, a publishing goal, right? We're not talking at this point about doing a quote unquote Kickstarter for a print on demand project, which I've got really strong opinions on. But Kickstarter is going to get you a certain amount of the way there. But then you've got to bring your own audience. And I'm a big proponent of having lots of legs under my table. So I do an email newsletter, absolutely, here on Substack. I do a couple of them, as a matter of fact. I've very much seen the value of developing that free membership tier on Patreon itself, and that acts very much like a newsletter. And I do also have my own outreach through my website and through web rings and a lot of other places. When I'm going to do a Kickstarter, this is something that I'm going to now use all of those legs under the table that I've been developing for years and years. Now I'm going to lean into I'm going to I'm going to get value out of the work that I put into building those things. I don't think that this is a time to say, well, I want one or the other. I'm gonna do a newsletter, but not Patreon free membership or something like that. This is something that you should be building right now, even if you don't think you've got a Kickstarter in your near future. This is something you should be leaning in on and building now so that you can use it later. Okay. So yeah, that's newsletters. Yes. Patreon membership. Yes. Free membership. Yes. All of that stuff. Yes. The only time that I start to throttle back a little bit is when it comes to monetization. I want to be able to focus most of my efforts into one or the other. Otherwise, you end up having outreach like, "Hey, don't forget, join our community on Patreon, or you could do it on Subscribestar, or you could subscribe on Substack," and you start giving all these lists of things. And what you find in commerce and merchandising very, very quickly is that too many options can be a bad thing. And also kind of looks a little desperate. You can, coffee and Patreon and Subscribestar, and you list and you list and you list. I would much rather focus my efforts. And so when I'm out there doing my personal outreach on this for my comics, I'm going to be talking specifically about Patreon. When I'm promoting the Webcomics Handbook or webcomics.com, then that messaging is going to change, because then either a direct subscription on webcomics.com or a Substack subscription on the Webcomics Handbook, then that's much more where I want to direct it. But in general terms, when I'm merchandising, I'd like to keep things focused. And so I don't have too many options for my backers. George says, I write a comic strip, let it percolate, then start drawing it. Halfway through, I don't think it's funny or good enough, and I give up on it. Don't know how many half finished strips I have. How do I break this cycle? Uh, I've got two thoughts on that. Number one, your gut may be right. It might not be funny enough. It might not be ready yet. And that's not an indication that you should stop. It's an indication that you should start, right? In other words, what you're experiencing there is very much what I want to happen with somebody who might be struggling with writing humor. In other words, you're writing it, you're letting it sit for a while, you're coming back and judging it. Now, and by the way, I don't want to judge you on the little bit that you chatted there. So I'm hoping that after Percolate is a rewrite session, okay, where you're improving it, where you see this isn't as funny as I thought it was in the moment. Now that you're out of the mindset that you were, I see that I need to improve it, and then you improve it. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that that's happening, and then you start drawing it, and then you're like, this still isn't there yet. That's an indication that you might need to do 2 or 3 rounds of rewrites before you start drawing. Or it might just be that you can see now where you're at that this isn't hitting. It isn't happening for you. And there's a couple of things you can do at that point. If you happen to be a member of the Comic Lab community, you can go into the critique channel on the Discord server and you can get a lot of really thoughtful replies, some thoughts on where that is, how you can improve it. The trick there is once you get good information, once you get good feedback, you've got to have the stones to actually take that advice. And as strong as I see the Comic Lab Discord server, time and time again, I see people getting good advice in Discord, and then they say, "Well, I'm gonna do it my way." Or they come up with some crappy excuse why they're not going to do that, and they go trailing off and they post something that I look at it later and I'm like, geez, I wish they would have listened to good advice when they got it. So if you are going to do that, you do got to take the advice when you get it. You're there for a reason. You know this isn't working. You've got to take some advice when you get it. So on one hand, part of me wants to really encourage this. And this is part of the process of getting to something funny. Uh, and I believe strongly in that. Now I'm going to say something that contradicts it entirely. And it's my other thought, and you can tell me how these two compare for you. The other way of looking at this is that the best way to combat this is set yourself a deadline, right? If you set yourself a deadline that I'm going to do one comic a week, which is a perfectly good deadline to set for yourself, right? Or maybe one every 2 weeks or one every month. You don't have to do this every day. In fact, I would much rather you see you take your time and do so and post steak for your readers once or twice a month than to give them crappy hamburgers every day. And there's a lot of people doing that. They're posting every day, and it's crap every day, every day. I would much rather see you take your time. But once you set that deadline, this is when I'm going to have this done by. That prevents a lot of this stuff from happening. Like when you get to that doubt period in the middle, but you've got a deadline, that's when you push yourself through. Those are two conflicting pieces of information, and they're both absolutely right. They're both useful. And that's because your specific set of variables may be different. In other words, you might be somebody that really needs that second and third round of rewrite. Maybe writing humor is not your strength, and humor is very difficult to write. Maybe that's not your strength. Maybe you need to go back for another rewrite. That may be true. Or it might be you need a kick in the bottom to get back to work and stop doubting yourself, and you need that. With that, I can't tell you which one that is. Okay, If you'd like, I can review your stuff in a comics consultation, and that information is available on the Webcomics Handbook here on Substack, and we can talk about that. There's one person, there's a couple people now that have me on like a weekly, or and in some cases a monthly retainer, where we've got a regularly scheduled appointment to sit down, and they send me all the stuff that they've written. They're trying to do humor, and they'll send me a sheet full of comic strip scripts, and we'll go through them one by one and talk about whether they're hitting or not. And if not, then the next conversation becomes, what can we do to make this better? I can't always give you the punchline. In fact, I would much rather not me give you my punchline, because my sense of humor may be different than your own. You need to find your voice as a writer. But we talk about how you can find your funny. And we talk about strategies for that. They've turned into some of these recurring consultations have turned into really good ongoing conversations. I can't tell you without looking specifically at your work which one of those two is more suitable for you, but I can tell you those are the first two things that come to mind when I hear that. It's either you honestly do need the rewrites, or you need a kick in the pants to get going. And I can't. It would be very, it wouldn't be a good idea for me to just take a guess and to shotgun it and to say, I think you need a kick in the pants. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you need to go back and rewrite. Maybe you need to get to a point where you say, you know what? Writing isn't my strong suit, and I need to collaborate with a writer. And then that's a whole nother conversation too. Oh, look at that. Shep has another question, well, that has to do with deadlines. We just got done talking about that. It's going to flow. This is going to look like we planned it. Shep says, when working to a deadline, how do you strike the right balance in terms of simple, easy to draw panels versus complex, time consuming panels where the story comic may require more of the latter? If the comic requires it, you do it. You can't come up and say, well, I only allow myself 3 complicated panels per page, and I've already used that allotment. There are some pages that take longer to do. And yeah, I know you're working on deadline, and it may mean that you need to work a little bit harder, or start a little bit earlier. You got to do what you got to do. But skimping on the panels that require more visual storytelling is just going to hurt you in the long run. And by the way, I don't know what kind of I just got done talking about the importance of deadlines. As important as a deadline is, and it's important, that comic is more important. So if you have a choice between blowing the page and blowing the deadline, blow the deadline. Blow the deadline. Put it out next week. I've done that a few times, where I said, "Hey, this page is just taking longer than I thought it was going to." Now, if you're in a much more rigid situation, for example, you're working under contract, there's a payment involved, stuff like that, or you're working as part of a team, then you need to manage your time better. You need to maybe start earlier, or do any of the number of things that you need to do to make that page work. But you never skip on a page when it comes to that, even if you're on deadline. And excuse me, and let's face it, there's lots of ways you and I know both that you can kind of grease the skids and not necessarily cut corners, but there's some shortcuts we can take when we're in a situation like that. I'm not a big copy paste guy, but copy paste can be valid as long as you do it in such a way that you don't get caught doing copy paste. If you can get caught doing it, you're not doing it right. You gotta copy paste like a pro if you're gonna do it right. And make some changes along the way so it's not so obvious what you're doing. But there are ways that some of those panels that don't require that much visual storytelling, you can get those done a little bit quicker so that you can spend time on the panels that require a lot more of your attention. Uh, all of those are valid. All of those are valid. But I would say that if it comes down to blowing the page or blowing the deadline, blow the deadline. Unless again there's money involved, then hitting that deadline becomes the mark of a professional, and you've got to really be a little bit more harsh with yourself when it comes to time management. Most of this stuff in my own personal life, most of this stuff comes down to time management. And it comes down to I need to get into focus mode much more quickly. I need to put down the phone, put down the distractions, and make sure that I'm focused 100%. 9 chances out of 10, when I've been in this situation, it's been because I was getting a little bit too fast and loose with my time management, and I needed to get a little bit stricter with myself, put TikTok down, and get to work. That might be the same with you too. I know, I've been guilty of it. George says, yeah, I tried setting a deadline, but I go smoking past them as there's no consequences in missing them. Yeah, these are all real problems. This all kind of ties together. I do rewrites, one or two, but maybe I need to refine and edit and refine more. Yeah, I that very may be the situation. But again, I think at that point, when you've gotten to the point of a couple of rewrites and you're drawing it and it doesn't feel funny, I think you need to get some other opinions on it, and people who you can trust to give you a disappointing opinion if that's what it takes. Right? Your significant other, your best friend, these are horrible choices, right? And you see this mistake happen all the time. Oh yeah, because we hear our heroes say, "Oh yeah, my wife is my greatest critic. She always tells me." Well, that may be. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, uh, but I'm saying that's a recipe for disaster, especially for somebody you're in a loving, committed relationship with. Uh, Putting them in that situation where they've got to tell you this really isn't happening, oh boy, don't do it. You need a friend, or better yet, a colleague, somebody whose work you admire, and that you can get into a back and forth like this. Maybe they're asking you for the same thing, and you're asking them, and you can kind of collaborate again. Again, this is why I'm so proud of the Comic Lab Discord server. We've got that situation set up so you can easily go in and you can ask for advice, and then it's kind of like you've got to participate to become a part of the group. And so if you become one of those people that always come in and ask for help but you never offer help, you're going to see people pull away from you after a little bit because you're not a full participant, right? So go into that Comic Lab Discord server, or I'm sure there's lots of other places like them. I'm just not familiar with them right off the bat. Go in there and get some advice from people who know what they're talking about, who don't have an emotional connection to you that you're risking or putting them in an awkward position for them to say, "Hey, this isn't so great." Right? It's something that you've got to really be careful about. That may not be what they're looking for out of life, is telling you that this comic isn't working. Especially if you've got an emotional relationship with this person. So we're just about at the halfway point, and once again, uh, this is something that I like to mention. We talked about the comics consultations. You can find them over there at bradgeiger.substack.com, the webcomics handbook here on Substack. And there's two different consultations. I can either sit down with you with no prep for 30 minutes and we just fire back and forth, or for the full 60-minute consultation, I will prepare a whole bunch of thoughts in advance. I'll have a written consultation. We'll sit down, go through those top to bottom, and then we'll talk about them back and forth. We'll have a discussion at the end of the conversation. You'll get that full written consultation. Erotica joining us says, remind us which Patreon level includes Discord access. I think we set that up so that you get Discord access at at every level. So you can come in, I think the lowest level is the $3 level. You can come in at the $3 level and get Discord access. That's one of the base level rewards that we set up on that tier, which is something that I kind of believe strongly in. And that is that I think the perfect Patreon reward tier setup is right now around 3, 6, and 12. 3 being you're not actually giving away rewards, not super physical rewards. You're giving away stuff like early access in the Discord server. At $6, then you're going to have some kind of digital reward that has a certain degree of demand behind it. $12 is a higher demand digital reward. Do not sleep on digital rewards. People have a lot more. They place a whole lot more value into digital rewards than you realize. The one thing you don't want to do on Patreon, you don't want to get involved in physical rewards because the shipping and international backers destroy any amount of revenue that you might be making through physical rewards. I've got one physical reward tier on my Patreon, and I manage it very, very carefully. Super, super careful with how those rewards get delivered. Otherwise, they'd be wiping me out. Chris Eliopoulos joining us saying, speaking of advice, you find it hard to give advice about someone's work that is kind of subpar. I feel like whenever I give advice that they need 1,000 hours of deliberate practice, I get pushback. Do you get people coming back at you when you give tough advice? Every once in a while I do. Like when I'm doing a consultation, I've had maybe out of the maybe 2 or 3 dozen consultations I've given in the last couple of years, I have gotten what I considered to be a significant degree of pushback twice. Uh, and it doesn't change what I say. The answer is what the answer is. In fact, that it just ties all together because sometimes the other question I get, and I got this from a good friend of mine, don't you feel bad making people pay money for you to give them advice? And I go, no. And he says, why not? I said, this is very simple. I've been doing outreach in terms of trying to share what I'm learning and share what I know and try to share good advice with other cartoonists, something I've been passionate about going all the way to the beginning. But I've been doing that in a focused way since 2010 when I started webcomics.com. I've been sharing advice for a long, long time. And I found out one thing really, really quick. If I share my advice with you for free, it's very easy for you to discount it. It's very easy for you to say, well, who cares what this guy says, right? But once we get into a situation where you're paying for a consultation, you're taking what I'm saying way more seriously. You have to take it more seriously because you paid money for it. You got into you. In other words, that value translates into the value that you're taking that advice with. And that means I'm not wasting my time because I got into a situation, many situations in the early 2010s where I would be doing this for free in certain platforms and certain situations. And I would put a lot of time and effort into what I was putting out there and just getting shrugged off. And when I started doing the paid consultations, I realized people were taking me more serious. It was the same information. They were just taking it more seriously. So yeah, I have gotten pushback. It doesn't happen as much because I limited those times when I'm giving away free advice. I do that on the Comic Lab podcast, right? I'll do that a little bit on the Comic Lab Discord, but the main reason I do it on the Comic Lab podcast is number one, it still scratches that itch to share the stuff that I think cartoonists need to know, be part of that conversation. It's something that's been a real driving force in my life for a long time, and If you listen to it or don't listen to it, I never find out. I don't, and frankly, I don't care. So I don't have that feeling of my time has been wasted. In fact, when I take a look at things like our subscriber numbers, our listeners, the number of downloads we get a month, stuff like that, I know that we're being paid attention to because I can see that in the site traffic and the podcast traffic and stuff like that. But yeah, to answer your question, I've given tough advice a couple of times. One time, was a person that, their situation was their unemployment benefits were running out in a fixed period of time, and it was not a long period of time. And they were counting on comics to bring money in. And I said, you need to take that fixed period of time and go get a job because this is not going to happen. Your skills aren't there. It was another situation where the person was writing humor and they were not finding their funny. And there were some real problems with the writing in general in terms of they there were more problems than we had time to solve. Okay. And I said, you need to find a job. You are not, and part of the reason I did that was that there was, in terms of significant others, independence, and so forth, this was a bigger issue than comics. And there was just no way this person was going to make it. And you gotta be, if you're going to do this, you've got to be willing to look in somebody's eyes and say, hey, this isn't working out. This is going beyond what we can fix in a short period of time. And that's okay if this is a goal that you've got for 10, 20 years down the line. But in terms of making your rent payment in 3 months' time, you've got to be honest with yourself. This isn't happening. And you can see that we actually opened up website traffic and went through the statistics and stuff. And I was able to show them very, very easily, even if the ad revenue system were healthy at that time, which it was already on the decline. Uh, they were never going to make it. And they were doing a lot of things that I was really cautioning against, like purchasing advertising for their website. Like if you remember the days of Google Ad Manager, they were buying ads to put on other websites to say, hey, come over here and take a look at my website. Uh, and I was able to show them, they said, well, take a look. It's bringing in all this traffic. I'm like, yeah, but they're bouncing. They're leaving immediately. They're coming, they're seeing that this is not what they were advertised, and they're jumping. You're not building longtime readers out of this. And I said, if you need to prove it to yourself, just stop advertising for a week and see what happens to your traffic. If you aren't able to keep a certain number of that level that you get when you're advertising, then you know that you're wasting money. There were a lot of issues like that. So yeah. Sometimes when you give hard advice, sometimes you need to look at somebody and say, hey, and by the way, this is not an insult. This should not be an insult to anybody. This happens very often in humor where you can tell, at least if you've been doing this for as long as I have, or as some of my friends have, you can tell whether somebody's got the knack for writing humor, and when or in another case, they just aren't getting it, and it's going to take a long time to get to where they're able to produce funny on a regular basis. And sometimes you've just got to say, hey, and this happens very often. You say you're a great artist. You're a really, really good artist, but writing is not your thing, particularly not writing humor. You are not finding the funny. You don't understand what makes certain things funny. And you can see them flailing, just throwing concepts out, and you want to just take them by the shoulders and say, "Hey, this isn't for you. This is not happening." Uh, And maybe you should collaborate with somebody who does get it a little bit more. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's also an important conversation to have. Where else? Let's face it. This person goes to their significant other, they go to their kids, they go to their parents, they go to their best friend. They say, "Hey, what do you think?" And they say, "Oh, you're doing great. I love it." And what they're actually saying is, "I love you. I care about you, and I don't want to hurt your feelings." Or you go to a colleague that you don't have a really good relationship with, a peer, and they're going to say, "Hey, thumbs up, keep it up, champ." And you're not going to get real because there's no buy-in there's no reason for this person to do the tough job of saying, "Hey, this isn't working out for you." This is something that uh you you can't get anyplace else. That's why I really, really suggest putting that stuff into the like the Comic Lab Discord server and the critique channel, finding other places like that might be similar. Finding places where you can get good, honest opinions, because sometimes the truth of the matter is that you might be spinning your wheels, and it just you might have lots and lots of strengths, and either this one ain't it, or it's going to take you a long, long time to develop that. And that's something that you need somebody with a straight face to tell you, to tell you honestly, instead of blowing sunshine at you and having all kinds of wasted time, or at least it's a situation where you know that you're in for a long, long period of time to develop. AE Costello asks, "How can I join Comic Lab?" Just go over to patreon.com/Comic Lab. We'll get you signed right up. You can join, I think, at the $3, $5. We've got a $10 level, although at the $10 level, you get a personal affirmation from Susan McTaggart. And well, I don't know whether this episode has come out yet. We thought it was such a good idea because we had a bunch of people at the $10 level. That was originally the live stream level. And we stopped doing live streams for a number of reasons. And but those folks stayed at the $10 level. So Dave and I were like, "Hey, we got to do something for those people." And I heard on another podcast where they were doing something very similar. It was Pod Yourself a Gun, the Sopranos rewatch podcast. And for people at a certain level, they said, "Oh, we're going at the end of the show, we're going to give you a mob nickname." And they gave everybody mob nicknames. And what they found was a whole bunch of people went up a level so that they could get their mob nickname. And then either they'd stay, or maybe after they got their nickname, they went back down. But it was just this cool thing that was happening. And I said, "Dave, we could do that." And so we did it. And it completely backfired on us. Instead of getting people to bump up to the $10 level, what actually happened is a bunch of people heard their name on the personal affirmation and said, "Oh, I forgot I was at the $10 level." And then they canceled. They went from being a $10 backer to canceling it entirely. It was one of the dumbest things in terms of just dollars and cents. One of the dumbest things that we ever did. Because not only did it not encourage, we did get one person. We got one more that we're going to have to do. There's going to be one more. There's going to be a encore presentation of Susan McTaggart coming up in an episode to come. But other than that, we had one person bump up, and we had two or three people either cancel entirely or bump back down to the $5 level. So just goes to show you, sometimes even strategies that you're like, "Oh my God, this has got to work. This is so smart," turns out to just completely bottom out. Shep says, "I saw Craig Thompson's Ginseng Roots the other day and the art blew me away. Are there any artists that have any of that effect on you?" Oh, tons of art, and for 100 different reasons. Like I can look at my fellow Spice Rack Comics creator, Garth Graham. his art absolutely floors me time and time again. He does NSFW comics, the same as one of the comics I do, which is NSFW. And I look at his stuff and I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to draw that good. And part of that is like, okay, but keep going. And part of it is it's just wonderful to see somebody bring certain talents and skills to the craft that you just got to sit there with your jaw on your chest and go, ah, that was amazing. I love that. There are lots of people like that. And for, like I said, for a bunch of different reasons. Craig Thompson was a guy that it took me a long time to develop a appreciation for, but then once I finally, it finally broke through that he wasn't just a sloppy drawer, he was doing a thing. And for a long time, I looked at it and I'm like, that just looks sloppy to me. And that was partially because my aesthetic hadn't been developed. I hadn't developed the proper aesthetic to become appreciative of what he was doing. It was literally pearls before swine, in my case, to quote another syndicated comic strip. It just I was not, my cortex, my lobes hadn't developed. I don't know what it was, but finally, once my own personal aesthetic developed and I had a better appreciation for comics illustration in general, then I could look at his stuff and go, oh, that's masterful. And you look at Wallace the Brave, who is kind of like Craig Thompson's antecedent, or whatever, spiritual, whatever they call that, somebody that carries on the tradition. Uh, and yeah, it's like wonderful. It's so cool to see. Chris Eliopoulos is another one. There's a guy. If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't draw like Chris. I couldn't draw that well because Chris is all about control and minimization, simplification. And I don't got any of that. You got to be really. People look at somebody like Schultz, for example, and say, well, ah, minimalism, it's easy. You're just doing fewer lines. I try to do that sometime. Try to draw a truly minimalist comic. You've got to put 10 times more thought into what you're not drawing than what you are drawing. And Sarah Anderson, Sarah Scribbles, another great example. You can kind of toss that off and say, well, that's just a little sketch. There's things that Sarah's doing in those panels that are beyond what I could ever attempt. And again, just prove it to yourself. You'll fall on your face just like I did every time I've tried to do it. It's not easy to draw in a very controlled style. You just can't. John says, when I was reading comics in the 90s, I couldn't appreciate Mineola. Now I have a much greater appreciation. Yeah, same thing, same thing. And in fact, I kind of was the same way about Mineola. I was like, ugh, what the heck? All these straight lines. Erie says, for Comic Lab, do you guys choose what the stinger will be, or does the editors decide? We do. We do that just as we are. We actually, every once in a blue moon, we'll have like a mistake or something, and then we'll just put a note into our editor. Take that part at the 45-minute mark, and when you cut that out, make that the stinger, because it was a pretty funny blooper or whatever. But 9 chances out of 10, when we're done recording the podcast, while we got our energy up, while we got the mics hot, we just record a stinger at the very end. We'll literally just go, what do you got for a stinger? And Dave will go, well, we talked about lettering. Let's do this bit about word balloon tails. And a lot of times it's straight up improv. Like Dave will say, I've got an idea, just follow my lead. And he'll say a word, and it becomes an improv exercise where he says, funny thing about my word balloon tails, I found 3 of them in the backyard in the gutter. I had no idea what they were doing back there. And you kind of yes and that concept. And either sometimes when we get to someplace funny, sometimes like the one that I just did where I stand to myself, it goes nowhere, and we go, okay, that wasn't no good. Let's try something else, and then we find something. Uh, but yeah, the stingers we do live as we're recording the show, we'll just kind of go in and say, uh, I got something funny. Let's pretend I'm Orson Welles and you're Susan McTaggart. That's actually a pretty good one. The only thing is, Dave is, in terms of making that comedy work, Dave is operating with one hand tied behind his back because he does voices and I cannot do voices. I can't do voices. I can't do accents. He can do all of it. So he'll be like, yes, Brad, this is Susan McTaggart. I see you've got Orson Welles with you. Why don't you have something to say, Orson? And I'll go, yes, this is Orson Welles, and I liked canned peas and also wine, and I may be drunk at the time. And it's just he's got a terrible partner. I can't do voices like he can. Don Kelly says minimal drawing is tough. I start but end up wanting to add more details. Yeah, me too. I can't do it. And I did try a little bit. It's turned into something a little bit different. But here's one thing that I might suggest for those of you who want to kind of try to do something like that. I started doing for my Patreon something I call bonus cartoons. And this started many years back. I wanted to get better at drawing single panel comics. I knew it wasn't a strength of mine. Uh, because again, I'm not a minimalist guy, and single panel is all about minimalism. It's about one illustration, one caption, uh, and that's it. And if you've got, and by the way, if you're doing more than that, your single panel comic is probably failing. If you've got a word balloon in the illustration and then a caption beyond that too, that's probably failing. It's very single panel is very, very focused. It's built to be like that. And I knew I wasn't good at it. I knew I stunk at it, quite frankly. So I started going to my Patreon backers. I said, hey, on Mondays, I'm going to do a single panel comic and just post it for you guys at the different levels. Uh, it's not something that's technically part of your reward, but it's something that's coming through that I'm only sharing with Patreon backers. So, it is what it is. See if you like it. And I've gotten, just by doing that, I've gotten considerably more comfortable with that format. And you know what? I'll say it. I've gotten better. I don't know that I'm as good as my heroes are. I'm not Jason Chatfield good. I'm not Asher Perlman good. Met Asher Perlman at the American Library Association. What a nice guy. Way too young. Wait to be as good as he is. Him and Jason both piss me off in that regard. Way too young to be as good as they are. Jason, Asher, Sarah Anderson, you look at their work and you see the work of somebody that has way more years under their belt than they got chronologically. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know what they did, what deal with the devil, but yeah, I met Asher. What a nice guy. I told him to his face. I said, I don't know how your brain works. I've been trying to figure it out for years. I don't know what's going on between those years, but I'm going to keep trying to crack the code. But I did. I became better at doing that. And part of that, I guess we're tying this all up in one little bow here. Doing that was part of me knowing I wasn't very good at something, setting myself a deadline, and then trying every Monday to come across and bring something there. In fact, I ended up, and I'm still, by the way, still have a big branding problem with this. I still call them bonus cartoons because I tried to stop calling them bonus cartoons, and then mentally something, threw a monkey wrench into the gears. And then once it was something that wasn't a bonus, see, if I say it's a bonus, I'm like, nah, if it stinks, who cares? It's just a little bonus. You can't complain about a bonus. It's a bonus, right? And by the way, I hate to hear those words coming out of my mouth, but it's how I was thinking, right? And I go, hey, And when I stopped calling them bonus, I had a real panic. Oh shit, I got to get serious about this. And then I had to go back to calling them bonus. I still got to figure out what to call those things. I still don't know how to brand them. Eventually, I got enough to do a book. Uh, got to call them something. I can't keep calling them bonus cartoons. But in that regard, that approach backfired on me. Hopefully, you're not as twisted up here as I am. But yeah, I just said, hey, this is just going to be a bonus. It helped me approach it a lot more lightly, and also Geiger's gifts. Yeah, that's not bad. I do like the alliteration. And Beth saying single panel comics are very hard to do. Yeah, incredibly hard. You've got to really be a focused person. And I, as you can tell just by listening to my live streams, focus ain't my strong suit. But yeah, I that it also helps for me. I was playing to the home crowd too. In other words, I had a whole bunch of people who I knew were Brad Geiger fans. They were kind of fans of the kind of thing that I do. Okay. So I could put it out to that group and number one, give them a little extra reward for being a Patreon backer. But also I was able to get people who were going to be kind of into what I was doing in the first place. I wasn't just throwing it cold on a group of people who didn't have any buy-in into the Brad Geiger mythos, whatever that is. Do you understand what I'm saying? I had a little bit more receptive audience, and that I was able to build on and build on until now. Like a lot of times, speaking of, oh man, this sounds like I planned it. Remember how I was telling you sometimes it's okay to blow a deadline? Well, I did just this past couple of weeks. I knew I was going up to visit my family in Michigan, and when I do something like that, I usually put a little placeholder on my website just for those people who are going to the website, so they don't think that I just dropped dead. Little something new, and I'll put a note up there. Hey, we're doing vacation this week. No new evil ink, but hey, here's a little something to reward you for coming to the website. And I've been using my single panel comics for that. And uh, they get great reception. They because now I'm much more confident. And after kind of cutting my teeth in front of my Patreon diehards, now I feel much more comfortable putting those in front of a more general audience. I use those on social media. Halloween is right around the corner. And if you follow me on my socials like Blue Sky and here on Substack, I usually do a countdown to Halloween. Those are all single panel comics. I do one a day all the way up to Halloween. I got a lot of Halloween stuff or stuff that can fit into Halloween, like vampires and witches and stuff like that. Uh, and now it plays really well to a general audience because I started kind of playing to my strengths a little bit. All of which to say, I put those up on my website and on the Evil Inc. website, and then it was something where I realized, hey, I need to get another week ahead because I really do like putting that comic out to Patreon backers a week early, and I hadn't been hitting that goal for this entire storyline, frankly. So it's like, you know what? I'm gonna blow that deadline for another week, and I put new content up, but it wasn't the Evil Ink comic, right? But I wanted to get ahead of a schedule again so that I could give those Patreon backers a little bit of their early access reward. Also, give my colorist Alex Heberling a little extra time on the colors. We were doing a lot of stuff that there was an appropriate amount of time, but now no extra time, and we were doing a lot of. It got posted as soon as it was done, and I don't like doing that. I like getting my buffer, giving lots of time to my colorist to work their magic, make me look better than I have any reason to look. And that's so I blew the deadline intentionally, because there were some things that were more important. And there's always going to be a give and take. There will be repercussions. I'm sure I lost maybe some readers this week when I did it for the, and did that. We're going to take one more week, right? Eh, no, listen. The good news there is that there's only an infinite number of readers out there. And if I lost a few, I'll just have to do real good work and gain a whole bunch more back. You can't sit there and worry about losing readers. There's an infinite number of readers out there. You'll remember. I think Ruffles potato chips had a slogan back in the day: "Munch all you want, we'll make more." Maybe that was Pringles. Anyway, readers are the same way. Readers are the same way. Hey, you lose a few readers, so there's always new readers coming in. Okay, let's close. Oh, Art by Mesa. Man, plug your YouTube down there. I saw that video of your drawing setup, Mesa, and you did such a good job with that. Promote yourself by all means. And also, drawing by candlelight, such a good idea. I did it for a while. We had candles that like smelled. It supposedly they're like, this candle smells will evoke Haunted Mansion from Disney World. And by the way, it really kind of did. And I was drawing by candlelight in here for a long time. Or this one reminds you of this thing or that. So I chuckled because I'm like, oh, I'm not the only person that draws by candlelight. Art by Mesa says, speaking of age, any advice for someone that gets the occasional paranoia about whether they'll actually finish their stories within their lifetime and tempering the urge to rush the process? Well, listen, I don't know that I've got magic words for you, Mesa, but I will say this. You've got two outcomes here, right? Two possible outcomes. You could rush through and get this thing done before you eventually shuffle off your mortal coil. And just right before you kick, you get to hold this comic in your hand that's complete, but a little bit disappointing. Or you can take the time that you need, put the work in that you need to work, and run the risk that before the Grim Reaper shows up and knocks on your door, you still got a few pages left to do. You and you know what? There's been a lot of works of art that we still think of today that are unfinished works. There's been unfinished symphonies, unfinished paintings, sculpture, even comics, and there are worse things than a really great comic that's unfinished. There really are. There are worse things than that. It's nothing that anybody's. Listen, I got news for you. That's going to be me. There's no way I'm going to tie up all these Evil Inc. storylines before I finally kick. It's just not going to happen. Evil Inc. will at one point be an unfinished work. Dave Kellett talks about Drive. He's got this idea in mind, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and that's great. And I love him for it. That's fantastic. That ain't me. That ain't me. I come from I come from a different background, a different mental background, and I'm probably going to be doing this until I can't for one reason or another. So at some point, Evil Inc. is going to be an unfinished work. There's going to be finished chapters, finished storylines. There's going to be parts that can be read as a beginning, middle, and an end unit. But at some point, there's going to be some chapter that, like that Monty Python bit, I think in Holy Grail, where he dies at the drawing desk and just keels over. There'll be one of those pages of Evil Inc. where it's just, But until then, see what I did there? But until then, I think what you do is focus on doing the best work you can instead of instead of getting into this mindset where it's going to be complete, but it's going to be crap. Nah, take your time. I've seen your work, Mesa. You're good at this. Your readers deserve your best. And if you've got a few pages at the end before everything comes to a close, so be it. There's worse things than that. Erie says, I'd like to chime in too. I lived above a funeral home. Wow. There are some stories. I can tell you, age doesn't matter. Anybody can die at any time for any reason. No need to rush. Oh, what a great way to kind of tie that all up with a bow. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, yeah, look, we might assume we've got decades in front of us. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Uh, you can't get all fixated on that. It's a great way to get morose. It's a great way to sit there and go, "Oh crap, what's going on with my life?" Nah, don't do that. Make comics instead. And if they're great unfinished comics, so be it. Think about it. Think about it. Especially, I come from a syndicated comics background, or at least that was where I wanted to go in the very beginning. Probably most of the great syndicated cartoonists, other than Schultz, who kind of called his shot and brought everything to an end. And people like Breathitt and Watterson who did the same. There was a good fair amount of them that just checked out, and their work ended, and then somebody came in and picked it up and did it. We you can think about feel about how you do. I think there's good things about it and bad things about the whole idea of somebody coming in and taking over somebody's creative work. But eh, great. I think the much more important thing for you to do is to focus on the work and not worry about whether there's going to be a page or two missing at the end. There's worse things. There's worse things. Okay. So on that very. Hopefully, I was trying for upbeat there. I feel like I hit morbid, but I was trying for upbeat. I'm not very good at being consoling and optimistic. That's why Dave and I are such a good team on Comic Lab, is because he's super optimistic. I realized, because I just finally started watching the show, he was Ted Lasso before Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso should be called Dave Kellett, somebody who is absolutely hyper optimistic in a good way. And I'm not saying that in like a, sideways compliment. Really super optimistic. He's usually, this is the point on the show where I kind of throw it over to him. He says optimistic things, but that's where we are today, for better or for worse. Thank you for joining us on the live stream. Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciated you coming in. Thank you for your topics and your questions. That was really fun. And again, if you are interested in a consultation, you and I can sit down face to face on Zoom. You don't have to have your camera on. I will have my camera on because I kind of need that visual feedback for myself. Also, if I'm going to be talking about you, you need to see. So that there's no misunderstandings, right? If I go, hey, yeah, you're a real piece of crap, you'll know that I'm just joking around. Not that I would ever say that, but you need the full visual influence. So if you are interested in a comics consultation, go over to bradgeiger.substack.com, search the Webcomics Handbook here on Substack, and we can get you all lined up. Thank you so much, everybody. It was great to talk comics with you. And hopefully you'll be back next Friday when we're talking comics with Brad again. If you haven't noticed, I'm putting all of these up on my YouTube channel. I'm chopping up little shorts and putting them on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. So if you came in a little bit late and want to know what we talked about earlier, you can see all of my live streams on my YouTube channel, and they are kind of fun to go back and listen to. So thank you so much. Have a great week, you guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you here next Friday. Bye bye, everybody.